Hello there and welcome to WordSesh EMEA. Thank you so much for having me. My talk for today is build your blazing fast site with Gatsby and WordPress. Firstly, a bit about me. My name is Muhsin and I'm a React developer at RT Camp, a WordPress VIP agency from Asia. I'm also the lead developer for Gatsby WordPress Themes, an open source project where we convert WordPress themes which are popular into Gatsby themes. I'm an author for Smashing Magazine and I'm also an expert reviewer for them. I come from Colombo, Sri Lanka, and in my free time I take photographs of wildlife and nature. I also like to travel to different places when I get the time. So let's talk about Gatsby and why you should consider Gatsby for your project. The first reason you should have heard by now is that Gatsby is extremely fast and it's blazing fast. Why is that? Because when you take a traditional WordPress site, it has a PHP server, and that PHP server connects to a MySQL database and fetches data from MySQL and builds your markup and serves you HTML, CSS and JavaScript. On the other hand, a Gatsby site already has HTML, CSS and JavaScript pre-built, and it just serves them statically over a static server like Netlify or any static server. Any static server. So with that, it's extremely easy for you to get 100% across the board on Lighthouse. It is possible with WordPress, but when you build a Gatsby site, it is extremely easy to get 100 across the board. Not only it's fast, it's extremely secure because, like I said before, it serves you just static files and does not have a live connection to a PHP server or even a MySQL database. Help! My blazing fast Gatsby site just got hacked, said no one ever. It is extremely cheap as well because, like I said before, it is serving you HTML from a static site. It is not taxing a server when every time you hit a Gatsby site. So you can read about this company going from $5,000 a month to just $5 a month in hosting once they switched to Gatsby, which is just mind-blowing. It also has an awesome developer experience because little things like it will tell you when an IMG tag does not have an alt attribute, helping you build a more accessible site. Not only that, it has hot reloading and live reloading as well. So every time you hit save, it will refresh your development site. And it has a GraphQL IDE that you can use when you are developing. So sometimes you have to compromise between great DX or developer experience and great UX or user experience. But when you use Gatsby, you're not really compromising because it has a great UX as well. So it is easy to get started, and I know many developers who have got into Gatsby fresh from a web development career. Like they are getting into web development, and right that way they get into Gatsby because it has a great documentation. It also has great tutorials, like beginner friendly tutorials. At the same time, a lot of people have written about their experience with Gatsby, which is a collection of like great resources for you to refer to. So with Gatsby, you learn React and GraphQL on the go because it is a smoother transition since it does not have you don't have to deal with Webpack, Babel or any other configuration. You can just get started with Gatsby, and it also has routing done for you. You don't have to worry about all these things. So you can watch this video where he talks about how Gatsby helped him to get started with React and GraphQL. Okay, so the hype is real. So let's get into what really is Gatsby. So Gatsby is a blazing fast React-based static site generator. What it does is it will create static sites for you when you are deploying the website or when you are building the website to be deployed. It is also an application framework because you can use it to build powerful web apps using React. It connects to multiple APIs and data sources like a GraphQL endpoint or Contentful, WordPress, Drupal, and so on and on. It can even connect to a Google spreadsheet. And with Gatsby, you build Jamstack websites. Jam here stands for JavaScript, APIs, and markup. So it hydrates into a React app, meaning it will become a full-fledged React application once the pages load into your browser and if the browser has JavaScript enabled. So why would you not use Gatsby? The main reason is that the content is not available immediately when you, for example, connect to database, connect to a WordPress site. Let's say you hit publish, and if you have 100,000 posts, it will take a good 20 minutes, for example, to build all your posts into static pages. And it does not have incremental builds for, so when you publish one single post, it will have to build the whole website for it to show in your Gatsby site. So let's talk a little bit about Gatsby, a little bit about React now that we have discussed Gatsby. As you might have heard, React is an open source library and it replaces the view layer of your application. It is declarative just like HTML because you write your React, which is made up of declarative components which are composable, and it can also be reused inside other components. For example, a button can be made into a component and used at multiple places. You write your HTML or rather JavaScript XML or JSX within your JavaScript files, which is a complete opposite to what you would have done when you're traditionally developing websites. React makes use of a virtual DOM, which makes it extremely fast to build web apps. Now that we have talked about Gatsby and React, let's dive into what is GraphQL. GraphQL is a query language, and with that you ask for what you need and you get exactly that. What it means is that when you would have used REST API, you would have to ask for a single post and you would get a title, content, excerpt, featured image ID, author ID, and so on and on and on. But when you use GraphQL, you would get a post and, for example, just the title. So it will only give you the title, saving you bandwidth and data. It is an alternative to REST API, and it uses a single endpoint rather than multiple endpoints for each resource. So you can query multiple resources from just a single endpoint. And also you can get multiple resources. For example, if you want to get an image, a featured image of a post, and the author name of a post along with the title and content, you can get all of that in one single request. It is created by Facebook and now it's open source. So let's talk a little bit about why you should consider Gatsby and use it with WordPress. So if you use this stack, you get a free and open source CMS to be able to use. Not only that, you can use a blazing fast website because it is using Gatsby on the front end, and it has a great developer experience and an even greater community. For example, it is very easy to get started with contributing to Gatsby as well as WordPress. For example, Gatsby is welcoming to newcomers and they encourage them to contribute by giving them free swag when you have a successful PR merged. And is it the best of both worlds? You will find out once you start using them. So when you use these together, there are two ways to do it. The first way is to use the WordPress REST API. And the second way is to use WordPress GraphQL or WPGraphQL, which we'll be looking at and in the demo. So if you use the WordPress REST API, you have to use the Gatsby source WordPress plugin. It is an npm module that you install in your Gatsby site. It fetches data from your WordPress REST API at build time, and it converts them and wraps the REST API data into a GraphQL schema. With this, you don't have to have any WordPress plugins installed because REST API is baked into core. However, I saw some issues later on when I start using this way. Here's a good tutorial that you can follow when you want to use the first method. And the second method is to use WPGraphQL. With this, you have to install the Gatsby source GraphQL plugin, which is again a node module you have to install in your Gatsby site. It fetches the GraphQL data from this WordPress GraphQL and stitches them into a schema. You have to have this WPGraphQL plugin in your WordPress site, and it is faster and more scalable, as I have experience when I'm building with it. So let's talk a little bit about WPGraphQL. WPGraphQL exposes WordPress data as a GraphQL schema. It is an open source project and created by Jason Ball, who is an awesome person in our community. You have to install a WordPress plugin for this, and it also has add-ons for ACF, custom post type UI, and more. And by the way, Gatsby has hired Jason Ball to work on WPGraphQL full-time. So if you use this plugin, we are in good hands, as you probably know. So how do you get started with a Gatsby project? So a standard Gatsby project, you have to have npm and node installed, and then you have to globally install Gatsby CLI. Once you have them globally installed, you do Gatsby new and my project in your desired folder, and then you change the directory into this folder and Gatsby develop, which will start up a development server for your Gatsby website. So now that we have talked about starting a standard Gatsby site, let's talk a little bit about Gatsby themes. Gatsby themes are a way to abstract away your code away from the content, so that your end user will focus on content and not on code. For example, if you have markdown files, you can have them in your site and have the markup in the theme, so that your components live in the theme and your content live in your site. You can use multiple themes on the same project. For example, if your site has a documentation site and a marketing site and let's say an e-commerce site, you can have three different themes for these three different purposes. It also has child theme support, just like WordPress has, so that you can extend your Gatsby themes. So now that we have talked about Gatsby themes, let's talk about Gatsby WordPress themes, which is an open source project where we port WordPress themes over to Gatsby. It was initiated by Zach Gordon, and I'm working on it, contributing to small themes like 2019 Gatsby theme and a table which was done by Alexandra. She's speaking at Gatsby Days London this year. So check out gatsbywpthemes.com and let's get into the demo now. Firstly, let's open up a terminal and create a standard Gatsby site. So first of all, you have to have Gatsby CLI installed. I already have it installed, but I'm just showing it to you so that you do not miss this step. So once you have it installed, you do Gatsby new and your project name. It can be my project. So with this will install a standard Gatsby project into this folder. So you can see the Gatsby website, which says fast in every way that matters. It is a free and open source framework in React that helps developers build blazing fast websites and apps. So you can see that how it works. It will pull data from your CMS like WordPress, or your markdown files, or your data like JSON data or any database, and then build them into HTML, CSS and React or JavaScript. And then you can deploy it for free sometimes on Amplify or Netlify or GitHub pages and so on and on. As you can see, it is being trusted by Airbnb, Nike, PayPal, and even your React documentation is a Gatsby site. So we are in really good hands and safe hands now. Okay, if it's done now, we can cd into my project and Gatsby develop. You can also, instead of Gatsby develop, type in yarn start or even npm start to get this working. Okay, so it's on localhost 8000. So you can see this is a default Gatsby site. You can see how it quickly loads different pages. Okay, this is a default Gatsby site, but now we are going to demo a Gatsby theme. So to do that, you have to create an npm package here. First of all, I'll create a folder. (2019) npm init, and then what you have to do is you have to create a yarn workspace here. So what I'm going to do is, instead of creating each step one by one, I'm going to copy over the packages file, package folder, package JSON, and the site folder into this. So this is an already completed theme, so I'm going to copy them over to our development theme, so that we save our time instead of writing out every line of code. So as you can see here, this is a yarn workspace. Workspace here refers to yarn workspace, so you have to have yarn on your computer. So with this, what you do is you have your site and your packages which has your theme. So this is the structure of your project. Okay, so I will start the development server for this, yarn start, which will do yarn workspace site start. Okay, so which will do which will do this, which will do actually npm run develop, which will actually run Gatsby develop. So it will start your website. So I'm going to talk about the configuration here. When you have a Gatsby theme, you have a Gatsby config file inside your site folder. The site folder is actually the site which may have your content, like a markdown file, but in this case we are not having markdown, we are having just a configuration file which will point to a website. This is my website, a WordPress website, and this is telling to use the experimental theme or Gatsby theme 2019, which is referring to this. So it is referring to the theme and it is passing the WordPress URL into it. Now if you go to the theme and go to Gatsby config, it is getting the WordPress URL which is passed in the site and then /GraphQL. We are giving a field name and a type name to the GraphQL schema that will be used. And here we are resolving the Gatsby source GraphQL, which we talked about in a couple slides back. If you look at the package JSON, you can see that Gatsby source GraphQL is being used along with a few other packages. So what does Gatsby GraphQL do? Gatsby source GraphQL will convert your WordPress data into a GraphQL schema. And the other important file apart from Gatsby config is the Gatsby node file. What does this file do? This file will build all your data into static pages. So if you take create post if you go into utils create posts, it will build your fetch data from GraphQL and then build them into static files. If you see here, it is creating pages. This API will create a static page inside this URL. So blog/post URI, the component is post template, and the context will pass the post data here. So if you look at here, the template is coming from source, templates, posts, and data, and single and archive. So if you look at source, templates, posts, and data, this is the fragment of GraphQL which will be querying data from, and archive will contain the archive page, and single will contain the single post page. So let's look at Gatsby node real quick. So this will get the template and then query from GraphQL, passing the fragment into it, and then it will get the data and destructure the data and then create pages using this data. So what I'm going to do is, okay, I'm going to install the packages first. Because the packages have not been installed, node modules. So in the meantime, I'm going to show you the GraphQL site. So the WordPress GraphQL, like I have discussed, is an open source project, and you can see that it provides GraphQL schema API for your WordPress site, and it is now sponsored by Gatsby since JSON bar is working for them. So as you can see here, you can get post and it will give you the data here. So you ask for first name, last name, and avatar, and it will give you the author's first name, last name, and avatar. And if you ask for the title, it will give you just the title. And you can also ask for general settings like URL, and it will give you the WordPress URL. And if you ask for the title, it will give you the WordPress site's title, and which we'll see in a minute. And I'm going to start the development server, which will call Gatsby node, which will in turn call create posts, which we saw here. And I'm going to explain some of the things, not the whole thing. So it will get the data from GraphQL, destructure it, and then build it. As you can see, nodes are all the posts, and it will build them. This is the blog archive page, and this is the blog page. All posts are the blog. So this all posts, if you see, are getting built one by one. So if you look at the console, you can see the create tag and create post. It has built the post one by one. So this create post is calling the create page API, which will get passed the path to it, and also the component to it, and the context to it, and which will in turn call the template, single template. Post template is a single template, if you can see, as you can see, single, and then it will build the markup here. The page context is what we passed from Gatsby node as this. The dot post are all these data, ID, post ID, and so on, and then this will build out a markup, so the single post page. I won't be explaining every line, but this is JSX. So if I go to localhost 8000, I will be able to see a Gatsby site, which is pulling data from my personal blog. Why should render React on the server side? And you can see the same post here. And if you see my personal blog, it will take a good 2 seconds to load, whereas this will take just not even a second to load between the different pages. and this has a previous post and so on and on. And you can go to the author name, and you can go to the category, and you can go to tags and so on and on. So let me, okay, I think this pretty much covers the demo. So let me go back to my slides. So what we covered, we saw what is Gatsby and what is WordPress plus Gatsby and how do we use it. We saw Gatsby source WordPress, which uses the REST API. We saw Gatsby source GraphQL, which uses the WPGraphQL, and we talked about WPGraphQL, and finally we discussed Gatsby themes and ended with a demo of this site. And I'm going to show one more thing, which is it can be easily hosted on Netlify. All you have to have is GitHub profile, GitHub project repository, and then you can host it on Netlify, which will give you something like this, where you can host it on a static site, and it is also extremely fast, as you can see. And you can click between different categories here and recent posts and so on and on. So this is, you can check out this website as well. Okay, and that pretty much ends our session. And Articam is hiring as always. Feel free to check out this URL and apply for a position that you like, so that you can work alongside me. And what you can do next is that you can check out these links, and especially the second link, which is a tutorial to what we just discussed today, where we are creating a Gatsby theme based on the 2019 WordPress theme. And also check out Jason Barr's content. He's great. And yeah, one more message is that let us spread kindness around, and thank you for listening to me today. And if you have any questions, you can listen to this, and I might create a recording for you separately. Thank you so much.